Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be looking at something that I think you'll find pretty interesting and maybe even a little bit unexpected. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, but not just AI in the abstract. We're going to be tracing its roots back to a period of history that you might not immediately associate with cutting-edge technology, the Cold War.
Yeah, it might seem like a strange pairing at first glance, right?
Mhm.
AI and the Cold War. But trust me, the connections are there, and they're deeper than you might think.
Exactly. So get ready to uncover some surprising links between this era of global tension and the rise of the technology that's shaping our world today. We're going to be diving deep into declassified documents, historical accounts, and expert analysis to uncover the hidden story of how the Cold War really helped to shape AI. And hopefully along the way, you'll gain a new appreciation for how historical forces can influence innovation in ways that we might not always realize.
It's a story full of intrigue, technological breakthroughs, and some pretty important ethical questions that are still relevant today.
All right, so let's set the stage a bit. The Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, lasted for decades. And it wasn't just about military buildups and the threat of nuclear war. It was also a fierce competition for technological dominance, a race to innovate and outperform the opponent in every field imaginable.
Exactly. We often think of the Cold War in terms of tanks and missiles, but it was also a battle of ideas and a battle for technological superiority. And that's where AI enters the picture.
Okay, so how did this competition for technological dominance actually play out in the field of AI? What were some of the key moments or turning points that really pushed AI development forward?
Well, one of the most pivotal moments, probably one that really kicked things into high gear, was the launch of Sputnik in 1957. When the Soviets launched the first artificial satellite into orbit, it sent shockwaves through the United States.
The Sputnik moment, as it's often called. It was a real wake-up call.
Yeah.
I mean, it demonstrated that the Soviets were ahead in the space race, and it had huge implications for national security and for, America's prestige on the global stage.
Absolutely. And the U.S. government responded with a massive investment in science and technology, education, research, and development. They were determined to catch up and surpass the Soviets in this new frontier of space exploration.
So Sputnik kind of kicked off this technological arms race, but how did it specifically impact the development of AI?
Well, Sputnik didn't directly lead to the creation of, AI as we know it today, but it did create this sense of urgency, this need to push the boundaries of what was technologically possible, and AI was seen as a key part of that.
So it was like a catalyst. It accelerated the timeline for AI research and development.
Right, and one of the most significant outcomes of this push for technological innovation was the creation of DARPA.
DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now, that's a name you hear a lot when talking about cutting edge tech and like, the really out there stuff. They're kind of like the mad scientists of the government, aren't they?
Yeah.
What's their connection to AI, though?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it, mad scientists. DARPA was founded in 1958 as a direct response to Sputnik. Their mission was, and still is, to invest in high-risk, high-reward research to push the boundaries in areas like computing materials, science, aerospace, and yes, artificial intelligence.
So DARPA was tasked with making sure that the U.S. wouldn't be caught off guard again.
Exactly. They were all about preventing another Sputnik surprise. And they had a very different approach to research than traditional government agencies. They weren't afraid to fund projects that seemed outlandish or even impossible at the time.
And AI fit right into that, right? I mean, in the early days, AI must have seemed like something out of science fiction.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what made it so appealing to DARPA. They were looking for those game-changing technologies that could completely disrupt the status quo, and AI had that potential.
So what were some of the early AI projects that DARPA funded? What were they hoping to achieve?
Well, one example that really captures the spirit of early DARPA-funded AI research is a project that was going on in the late 1960s called Shaky the Robot. It was developed at the Stanford Research Institute with funding from DARPA, and it was one of the first robots that could reason about its actions.
Shaky the robot.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Was this some kind of, secret weapon that they were developing?
Not quite a weapon. Shaky was more of a research platform. It was this big, clunky robot on wheels. But it was groundbreaking for its time. It could perceive its environment, navigate around obstacles, perform simple tasks like, pushing boxes around.
So not exactly Terminator material,
Yeah.
but still impressive for the time. It sounds like they were laying the groundwork for technologies like self-driving cars and, other kinds of autonomous systems.
They're exploring the possibilities of AI that could interact with the physical world and make decisions based on its surroundings.
So they weren't building AI soldiers, but AI that could navigate complex environments and, make decisions. That does sound like some pretty early groundwork for technologies like self-driving cars.
Exactly. And that's one of the key things to understand about early AI research during the Cold War. The military's focus wasn't necessarily on deploying AI in combat directly, but they were very interested in exploring how AI could augment human decision making, especially in those kind of, high pressure situations that the Cold War presented.
So it was more about creating AI that could work alongside humans, not replace them.
Right. It was about enhancing human capabilities, not replacing them.
Okay, that makes sense. So how did this idea of augmenting human decision-making with AI actually play out during the Cold War? Was it, crunching numbers to predict the enemy's next move or something like
You
that?
were on the right track. One of the key areas where AI started to play a role was in the development of what were called expert systems. These were computer programs that were designed to mimic the decision-making abilities of human experts in specific fields.
Expert systems, so not sentient robots or anything like that,
Yeah.
but more like really, really smart calculators that were programmed with specific knowledge.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. They were essentially sophisticated rule-based systems. You would feed them data, and they would use a set of pre-programmed rules to analyze that data and generate recommendations or predictions.
Okay, so imagine a system that could analyze satellite images and alert analysts to, potential troop movements or something like that. Or maybe the system that could help military commanders evaluate different courses of action based on available intelligence.
Exactly. Those are great examples.
So these expert systems were kind of like early warning systems in a way. They were helping humans process vast amounts of information and make more informed decisions.
That's a good way to think about it. They were tools for enhancing human judgment, not replacing it, but augmenting it. They were never intended to make decisions on their own, but to provide a second opinion based on the best available data and a set of logical rules.
And that was essential for managing the complexities of the Cold War.
Right. Absolutely. The Cold War was a time of constant information overload, and these expert systems helped to make sense of all that data and to, identify potential threats and opportunities.
It sounds like something straight out of a spy movie. Analysts huddled around computer screens trying to decipher cryptic messages and predict the enemy's next move.
It was a bit like that, yeah.
Were there any particularly notable examples of these expert systems in action during the Cold War?
There are a number of classified projects, of course, but one that eventually became public knowledge was a system called Visions of the Future. It was an expert system that was designed to help military planners think through potential scenarios and consequences related to nuclear war. It could model the effects of different nuclear strikes, estimate casualties, and help strategists assess the potential risks and benefits of various options.
Wow, that sounds incredibly high stakes. And this was a huge responsibility to design a system like that, knowing that the decisions it helped inform could potentially have global consequences.
Oh, it certainly was. And it highlights an important point that even back then, during those early days of AI development, there was an awareness of the potential ethical implications of these technologies.
That's interesting. We tend to think of AI ethics as a very modern concern, but it seems like those concerns were already present during the Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. People were already thinking about the potential downsides of developing AI for military purposes. There were concerns about the possibility of creating autonomous weapon systems that could make life or death decisions without human intervention.
So the idea of killer robots wasn't just science fiction. People were already considering that possibility back then.
Yeah, and it sparked a lot of discussion about, the appropriate level of human control over these systems. There was this sense that while AI could be a powerful tool for strategic planning, it was important to make sure that humans remained in the loop, ultimately responsible for the final decisions.
That's a debate that's still very much alive today.
Mhm.
The balance between human judgment and machine intelligence.
Exactly, and those early debates about AI and autonomy during the Cold War laid the groundwork for many of the ethical considerations that we're grappling with today.
This is all fascinating stuff, but before we move on to those modern-day ethical dilemmas, I'm curious, is there anything else about these expert systems that you want to highlight? Anything that might surprise our listeners?
Well, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that these early expert systems were limited by the technology of the time. They relied on what's called symbolic reasoning, which means that humans had to explicitly define the rules and relationships that governed their decision-making.
It was very labor intensive.
Yeah, and it limited the complexity of the problems that these systems could handle. They were very good at solving specific, well-defined problems, but they weren't very adaptable.
So kind of like the Model T of AI.
Exactly. Innovative for their time, but limited compared to the sophisticated AI that we have today.
So what changed? What allowed AI to make that leap forward?
That's a great question, and it takes us to another fascinating chapter in this Cold War story, the development of the internet. Because you see, the internet itself has deep roots in Cold War era research, and it would play a pivotal role in the evolution of AI.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that the internet we use every day to, watch cat videos and shop for shoes is somehow connected to the Cold War?
That's exactly what I'm saying, and it's a story that I think will really surprise you.
All right, well, I'm all ears. Let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. So, the internet is a product of the Cold War. Who would have thought? It's amazing how something we use every day has such deep historical roots.
It really is. And, the story of how the internet came to be is intertwined with this Cold War competition for technological dominance that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so spill the beans. What's the connection between the Cold War and the internet?
Well, it all starts with a project called ARPANET, which stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was funded by DARPA, the same agency that was behind Shaky the Robot.
ARPANET. I think I've heard of that before. Wasn't it some kind of top secret military network? Like something out of a spy movie?
Well, it was funded by the military, but it wasn't really about, transmitting classified information or anything like that. The goal of ARPANET was actually to connect researchers and computers across different locations, so they could share information and collaborate more effectively.
So instead of sending, files back and forth through the mail,
Mm.
scientists could just share data instantly.
Exactly. It was all about speed and efficiency. And it was also designed to be really resilient, with no single point of failure. So even if one part of the network went down, the rest of it could still function.
That's pretty clever. So ARPANET was basically like a prototype for the internet.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah.
It was the seed that would eventually grow into the internet as we know it today. But the transformation from ARPANET to the internet wasn't immediate. It was a gradual process that took place over several decades.
So how did it happen? How did this military-funded research project evolve into the global network of interconnected computers that we have today?
Well, as more universities and research institutions started connecting to ARPANET, it became clear that this network had the potential to be much more than just a research tool.
I can see that happening. Once you connect people, they start finding new and creative ways to use the technology.
Right, and that's exactly what happened with ARPANET. People started using it for things like email file sharing, even early forms of online chat. And as the network grew and evolved, it eventually became the foundation for the modern internet.
So this technology born out of Cold War research ended up connecting the entire world. It's incredible to think about the ripple effects of that initial investment.
It really is. And, it's a reminder that innovation often happens in unexpected ways.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier that the internet also played a pivotal role in the evolution of AI. Can you explain that connection a bit more?
Sure. Think about it this way. AI, particularly the kind of AI that we see today, relies on massive amounts of data to train its algorithms. It needs to be able to access and process vast data sets to learn patterns, make predictions, and perform complex tasks.
So it's like the internet became the ultimate training ground for AI.
Exactly. The internet provided the raw material that AI needed to evolve.
But those early expert systems that we were talking about before, they weren't exactly data hungry, were they? They relied on pre-programmed rules, not mountains of data.
Right, and that's where the shift to machine learning comes in. Instead of relying on humans to hand code every rule, machine learning algorithms are designed to learn from data. They can sift through vast data sets, identifying patterns, making connections, and updating their own models as they encounter more information.
So it's like they were given the ability to learn on their own, to adapt and evolve based on the data they were exposed to.
Exactly. That's the power of machine learning.
That sounds like a huge leap forward in terms of AI's capabilities.
Oh, it was a paradigm shift, and the internet was crucial for this transition because suddenly with the internet, AI had access to a virtually unlimited supply of data to learn from. Text, images, audio, video, all of it became fuel for AI's development.
So the internet didn't just change how humans connect with each other. It also changed how AI connects with the world, how it learns and grows.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like the internet gave AI its own set of senses,
Yeah.
Allowing it to perceive and understand the world in ways that were never before possible.
And it's all thanks to those early investments in ARPANET during the Cold War.
It's amazing to think about how those Cold War era experiments ultimately led to the AI revolution that we're seeing today.
It's a testament to the power of human ingenuity and, the unexpected ways that technological advancements can ripple through history.
I'm curious, though, were there any other interesting applications of AI during the Cold War? We've talked about those expert systems, but were there any other examples that might surprise our listeners?
Well, one example that I find particularly fascinating is the use of AI for language translation.
Language translation. Was that even possible with the technology they had back then?
It was still in its early stages, but the Cold War created this huge demand for accurate and efficient translation, particularly of Russian documents and communications. And AI researchers saw an opportunity to apply their techniques to this challenge.
So they were trying to create machines that could understand and translate human language. That sounds like something straight out of science fiction.
It was ambitious, to say the least. One of the earliest attempts at machine translation was a project called the Georgetown IBM experiment. It took place in 1954, and it involved using a rudimentary computer to translate a small set of Russian sentences into English.
Yeah, okay, and how did it go? Were they able to create a working translation machine?
The results were mixed, to put it mildly. The system was able to translate some basic phrases, but it really struggled with the nuances of grammar and syntax.
Hmm.
Human language is complex, and it's difficult to capture all of those subtleties in a computer program.
I can imagine. But I guess it was a start, right?
Exactly. It was a proof of concept, but not quite ready for prime time.
So those early efforts at machine translation, they laid the groundwork for the sophisticated translation tools that we have today, right?
Absolutely. The Cold War, with its emphasis on understanding the enemy's language, fueled a lot of early research into computational linguistics and natural language processing. And those efforts, though rudimentary at the time, laid the foundation for the development of the machine learning algorithms that power modern translation apps and services.
It's amazing to think about how those Cold War era experiments, driven by the need to decipher Russian Puro, ultimately led to tools that allow us to communicate with people all over the world.
It really is, and it highlights how technological advancements often have unintended
This
consequences.
is also fascinating, but it's also a bit unsettling. I mean, we've been talking about how Cold War fueled innovation in AI, but a lot of those early AI applications were driven by military needs. It makes you wonder about the ethical implications of that kind of development.
You're right to raise that point. The close relationship between AI research and the military during the Cold War definitely raises some important questions about the potential for dual-use technologies, technologies that can be used for both beneficial and harmful purposes.
Like a knife that can be used to cut bread or to harm someone.
Exactly. It all depends on the intent behind the tool.
So how did those involved in AI research during the Cold War think about these ethical dilemmas? Was there any discussion about the potential downsides of developing AI for military purposes?
Oh, there were definitely voices of concern even back then. Some researchers questioned whether it was wise to develop technologies that could potentially be used to automate warfare or to create weapons of mass destruction. But those concerns were often overshadowed by the geopolitical realities of the time.
So the fear of falling behind the enemy, the fear of being vulnerable to a technological surprise that drove a lot of the research and development.
Exactly. It was a time of high tension, and there was this sense that national security was at stake.
It sounds like a classic dilemma. The pursuit of knowledge and technological advancement, often driven by noble intentions, can sometimes lead to unintended consequences.
Right. And it's a dilemma that we continue to grapple with today as AI becomes more powerful and its potential applications expand.
So the Cold War, in a way, provides a cautionary tale. It reminds us that even the most well-intentioned research can have unintended consequences.
And that it's crucial to think carefully about the ethical implications of technological advancements before they're deployed in the real world.
Absolutely. Well, this conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's like peeling back the layers of history and discovering all these hidden connections.
And we're not done yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the key lessons we can learn from the Cold War experience as we navigate the evolving landscape of AI in the 21st century.
Sounds good. I'm ready to keep digging. So we've uncovered some pretty fascinating connections between the Cold War and the rise of AI. It's amazing how this historical rivalry really pushed the boundaries of innovation. But as we wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious, what are some of the key lessons you think we should keep in mind as we move forward with AI? as we navigate the future of this technology?
Well, one of the most important lessons, I think, is the value of collaboration and open dialogue when it comes to AI development. During the Cold War, a lot of the research was shrouded in secrecy, right? It was all driven by this fear that the other side would gain an advantage. But that secrecy, in a way, actually hindered progress.
Yeah, it's like working in a silo. You miss out on all those different perspectives and ideas. Plus, it creates this atmosphere of distrust, which, in the context of the Cold War, could be pretty dangerous.
Exactly. And while, the geopolitical landscape has obviously changed since then, there's still this tendency to view AI development as a competitive race. Whether it's between nations or corporations, everyone wants to be the first to the finish line.
So you're saying that more openness and collaboration in AI research could actually lead to faster progress and better outcomes. That seems counterintuitive, especially in a world where everyone is trying to get ahead.
It might seem counterintuitive, but I think history shows that collaboration often leads to greater innovation. Think about the development of the internet itself. It was born out of this collaborative effort between researchers, universities, government agencies. Everyone was sharing ideas and working towards a common goal. And that open approach has been crucial to its success.
Okay, I see your point. So how do we apply that lesson to AI development today? How do we encourage more openness and collaboration in a field that's so driven by competition and commercial interests?
Well, it's like a complex challenge for sure, but there are things we can do. First, we need to foster a culture of transparency within the AI research community, encourage researchers to share their findings, their methods, even their code.
It's like open sourcing AI in a way, right?
Yeah.
Making the building blocks accessible to everyone.
Exactly, because that kind of open exchange can really accelerate progress. It allows researchers to build on each other's work and avoid duplicating efforts.
But wouldn't that also make it easier for bad actors to misuse AI, to develop harmful applications?
That's a valid concern for sure, and it's important to have safeguards in place. Openness doesn't mean recklessness. We need to be thoughtful about what we share and how we share it. But I think the benefits of collaboration in terms of accelerating progress and identifying potential risks early on often outweigh the risks of keeping everything secret.
So it's about finding the right balance, being open but also responsible. Now, another thing that struck me during our conversation was how much fear and misunderstanding there was surrounding AI during the Cold War. It's like those old movies where robots take over the world, Makes for good entertainment, but it doesn't exactly foster a nuanced understanding of the technology.
Right, and I think public engagement and education are crucial for dispelling those myths and misconceptions.
So you're saying that we need to demystify AI to educate the public about how it works, its limitations, its potential impact on our lives.
Exactly, because if we want to ensure that AI is developed and used responsibly, we need to make sure that people understand it.
Okay, so how do we do that effectively? I mean, AI is such a complex topic. Where do we even begin?
Well, one approach is to make AI education more accessible. Integrate it into school curriculums, offer public workshops, online resources that explain AI concepts in clear and engaging ways.
And we also need to encourage more dialogue between AI experts and the public, right? Create opportunities for people to ask questions, voice their concerns, and contribute their perspectives.
Absolutely. It's about creating a two-way conversation, not just a top-down lecture.
This brings me to another question.
Yeah.
We've talked about the importance of collaboration, openness, and public engagement. But what about the role of government in all of this, in shaping the future of AI?
That's a crucial question, and I think another lesson from the Cold War is that government has a vital role to play in fostering responsible AI development. During the Cold War, government funding was instrumental in driving early AI research. And today, governments around the world are recognizing the importance of investing in AI research education and infrastructure.
But it's not just about throwing money at the problem, right? What kind of role should government play in ensuring that AI is developed and used ethically?
Well, governments can play a number of roles, from funding research into AI safety and ethics to developing regulations and guidelines for the responsible use of AI in various sectors. They can also play a role in fostering international cooperation on AI, promoting dialogue and collaboration between nations to address shared challenges and opportunities.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, you want to encourage innovation, but on the other hand, you need to ensure that AI is used for good, not for harm.
Exactly, and finding that balance will require careful consideration, open dialogue, and a willingness to adapt as the technology evolves.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on AI and its connection to history.
I'm glad to hear that.
As we wrap up our deep dive into how the Cold War shaped AI, Is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is this. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's not some inevitable outcome that we're powerless to influence. The choices we make today, the conversations we have, the values we prioritize will shape the trajectory of AI and determine its impact on our lives and the world around us.
That's a powerful message. It reminds us that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of AI, and that it's a responsibility we should embrace thoughtfully and proactively.
Well said.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into how the Cold War shaped AI. We hope you found this journey through history and technology as fascinating as we did. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation